nature has been an inspiration for humans in many different ways, through many different forms. It has been an inspiration for human in solving their daily problems. It has been an inspiration for humans in solving many different issues, and even it has been an inspiration also for architecture and the way human making art. Welcome to Design Studio One. Today's lecture we will be discussing about mimetic and mimicry in architecture. I think about a few weeks ago you have been learning a little bit about transformations. In short, transformations is the process of changing shape, changing form from an original object generated through observations, memories, or experiences into new form of object. And there are two ways of transformations, two approaches that we can use in doing transformations in architecture. They are mimetic and mimicry. So what is actually a mimetic? Mimetic is an adaptive imitation strategy that could be involving a form changing shapes. We call it morphological approach, or an adaptations of physiological, which is a change or adaptations of functions. Ecological, actually based on relationship between the natural object to its surroundings, and ethological aspect, which is based on a very unique or specific behavior of the inspired object. So if we add the terms bio in front of mimetic, it refers to actually an adaptive process which is taken from biological object or biological system. A mimicry, on the other hand, is an approach to mimicking nature in creating designed object through functioning like nature, appearance looks like a nature, and or utilizing nature as elements. Biomimicry is actually refers to the principle of function, relations, and strategy found in the nature. So mimetic and mimicry, they actually both quite similar because they share the same principles in trying to replicate or mimic or duplicate what is coming from nature. Either it's in this form of shape or functions in nature, relationship between object in nature, or some behavior that actually occur in nature. So, for example, if you have some inspirations taken from nature in the form of like a flower, right? So you may think like how to transform this flower into some form of architectural object or an art. A morphological approach is actually taken the shape of the origin object, right? But you need to involve some form of adaptation. So instead of recreating exactly the same flowers, you can take the predominant shape, the scale, or the structure, the shape of the structures of the flowers, and try to recreate in a new way. Just an example, you can try to be creative Say, for example, you try to modify, you can still have the center part of the flower, but you can change, like the shape of the uh, flowers by try to create a series of changes or transitions in shape or dimensions, or you can uh, consider this also as rotational rhythm, for example. The second approach is you can take the functions of the object. For example, that say you see the roots of the tree, for example, right? So when you see like the roots of the tree has the functions to support or to hold the trees against strong winds or any other form of lateral forces. So this kind of functions that you can actually take as an inspiration. So instead of trying to duplicate the shape of the roots, you can take also the functions of the roots and help them or explore in their supportive manner in the new object that you are trying to create. There are some interesting examples of, for example, a symbiosis, like how the trees provide shade and shelters for birds and animals, or there are some relationship between animals um, that is quite interesting. The last and the fourth of approach in mimetic can be taken from the unique behavior of an animals or natural objects, for example. So like if you look at a chameleon, for example, how they try to adapt to its surroundings by changing the color of the skins, for example. So there are many interesting objects that you can find in the nature. Some interesting animals. These are some pictures that I've taken from the internet, showing some examples of attractive animals, from the penguins, the birds, um, chameleons, a ladybug, frogs, tigerfish, flamingo, and so on, right? So you can take the beauty, the shape, the form, color patterns, the strength of a horse, for example, the beauty, the movement of the flamingo, for example. That sort of inspirations that can be taken, not like limited only by the form, the morphological aspect, but also taken the unique behavior and the connection between the animal and the nature. These are some examples of trees, the plants that you can take, whether they are aquatic plants or whether they are mushrooms, coral reefs, flowers, for example, ferns, dandelions, roots, foliage, cactus, etc. You can see the colors, the functions of the elements, for example, how like see in the morning the ferns can capture the water droplets and create some sort of refractions of light, etc., etc. These are another examples. There is a nature-made object, for example, like spider webs or uh, beehives, some cocoons uh, from a butterfly, bird nest, the structures of seashell, for example, the layer of paddy fields in Vietnam, for example. These are very nice examples that you can take from nature. And these are some more examples, interesting examples that you can take from the nature. These are what we call elementals, right? You can start from the stalactite that is formed in caves for thousands, if not millions of years. You can take various shapes of clouds, uh, the layer of cars, which is shaped by like the changings of water flows through billions of years, the movement of tidal waves in the sea, a very unique um, river in Ireland, for example, a dry sea salt, sand dunes, and so on. There's some very, very nice example from nature that you can take as source of inspirations. This is a peacock. I'm sure everyone's have seen this animal. It's very graceful bird, very beautiful. There are three types of peacocks. We call it one is Indian peacock, the second is Japanese peacock, and there's an African peacock. Um, Peacock is very unique. You can take the shape, the color patterns of the tail part that we call the train. So this is, you can take the behavior of the peacock, you can take the shape, the patterns, the colors. For example, these are some examples of art that is actually taken from peacock. You can try to adapt and recreate in different way. For example, like the left one, you can make like the peacock feather composed in circular fractal geometry, for example, in monochromatic color. Or like the one on the right, this is rearrange the patterns of the peacock feather in radial geometry, right? Um, which is using a similar color expression to the original feathers. So these are only a couple of examples. Or you can take the predominant visual elements of a single peacock feather and try to create repetitions or in diagonal grid in any color of your choosing. Right? And the left one here is actually doing in different way. So instead of taking what people mostly see from a peacock train or tail, this one taken the structural pattern of the train itself, and make a very interesting black and white shape. And the one here on the right is actually only taken the iridescent color of the peacock train or tails and try to arrange in a similar way, but not exactly the same. So these are a different example, which is taken from an insect, a bee, right? So you can take the shape of the honeycomb beehive, or as Ellen Bird Johnson do, he tried to recreate and capture the movement instead of like the shape, the commonly figured shape of a beehive, which is, in my opinion, is quite interesting. So the left one is actually taken by Marcus Johansson, tried to create a product, a 3D object, which is taken from a shape of octopus, for example, as they are moving, right? You can see the tentacles, like the very soft and smooth rotational kind of movement, right, with like with gradations of the colors, right, which just looks very nice. And the right hand side is actually, you can see this is the art called Helicons by John Edmund. This is a sculpture which is actually inspired by the anatomy of seashells. Right? A leaf is one of a most common object that being used as inspiration in many different art and object, for example. So you can take the shape of the leaves, or you can look deeper and see the structures of the leaf as a source of inspiration. And then you can try to recreate that inspiration, like the one on the left here, right? Just trying to make some like differences, like the bright side and the dark sides of, or the back sides of the leaf, right? And then try to compose in repetitions, right? Or you can take the different shape of leaves, for example, like the one in the middle here, or like the one on the right hand side. So using a different kind of techniques, for example. But if you look deeper and look the structures of the leaf, then you can like try to identify elements, much smaller elements that only appear, for example, in microscopic level, for example. But this is showing the actual structures of the trees, and try to recreate, try to see the bonding, the connection between elements, and try to recreate in your own way, right? But using but still having the same connections or interactions between elements, like the one on the left, like the one in the middle, or the one on the right. So three different techniques. And this is another example taken not only the shape, the form, but the physiological aspect, the functions. Like ferns has a protective function against the climate or against a threat. So this kind of protective functions of like a very specific element of the ferns is actually inspiring some people to create what we call this a packaging object, right? So this is actually only a folding paper. Then they can create a similar function, but by using different material with different geometry. This is a very nice and interesting art piece by using paper, done by Rogan Brown. So this is he's taking these inspirations is actually from human microbiome. Like in human body, they have so many different bacteria, archaea, fungi, right? That has its own function. So, so he sees this as a very nice and very interesting types of relational, or we call it ecological type of inspirations, natural inspiration that happen inside the human body. But the way he represent that connection is actually by seeing a similar connection and relationship between elements in the oceans, right, in the form of coral reefs. So he create that and make this kind of like artistic compositions made from paper cuts, right? And this is an art card done by Neri Oxman. The right hand side is actually a picture of human skin cell taken from a microscopic level, and the left hand side is actually what he tried to represent of the human skin cell in like in much more like two-dimensional types of arts, right? And another types of object that we can take as source of inspirations is, for example, like water. We may have seen it in so many different forms, like in the form of oceans, in the form of water droplets, in the form of snowflakes, for example, tidal waves, like the footprints that coming from the rains, for example. Instead of just the form, you can also take it further by looking at the functions of water in so many different environments, for example, like in the human body as the regulators of temperature, for example. It can be also perform function as habitat for aquatic animals. It connects all living creatures through its hydrological cycle. It has a natural behavior which is very unique, responding to environment. And this is a few example of a transformation actually done by different artists, which is inspired by water. You can see the left one is actually a graphical art done by Andrea Virginia, which is capturing the water movement. So if you can see like the fluidity of the water, um, like there is no sharp edges, like, because water is can be considered like shapeless. Um, the one in the middle is actually inspired by a tidal wave. Yeah, so this is like a graphical art done by Warp and Weft. And the one on the right is actually inspired by a whirlpool, right? This was done by Philippe Epeloy, right? So you can see like the shape, like the rotational shape of like a small white dash which is composed in a very unique geometry, right? And this is another example which is taken and inspired by moving air in sand dunes, right? So because air moving quite fast, and the sands build up, and sometimes like the characteristic of the sands when it captured the movement of the wind, and projecting this kind of like a linear shape the surface of like the surface of the dune that actually hit by the air, right? So uh, the art compositions on the right is actually inspired by these sand dunes and try to recreate in much more geometrical way. So these are some few example of transformation through mimetic and mimicry approach that could help you um, transform some ideas that you taken from nature and create a very nice art or architectural object in your design studio one. So hopefully this little insight is helpful. So thank you for watching and assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.